Hey, I think maybe it's working. Ah, well, yeah, I think it's working. I don't know how it is on YouTube's, but I think it's working. Now I need to figure out. Let's see here. I believe we are on the YouTubes now. As to whether or not people can hear us, because I don't know if we actually have an audience at the moment. Here, let me do this. I can hear you. I'm wearing headphones, which is the first time I've done this. I don't know if people who are watching. Sweet. All right, he can hear both of us then. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I don't think so either. So what I need to do, because I I don't think I've added you to the. All right. So let's see. Would you be considered a media source? No. Hmm I don't know if you would be considered window capture. Okay. Discord. Okay. Transition. Sorry, folks. So what we're trying to do, what I'm trying to do here is, I am attempting to bring Matt online through Discord, and for some reason it is fighting me on this. And so he's on Discord, and I can hear him. He can hear me. Apparently, y'all can hear me, but I'm trying to get him um, onto the show, where we'll talk about force and other things. Yes, I'll restore that. Transition. Yeah, and he has kindly allowed me to the opportunity to test settings. So let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. Yeah, exactly. Media source? Why not? Let's try media source. Nope, that's a local file. Audio input, audio capture. Audio. Try that maybe. Device. Nope, that's not it. Nope. So how was your Christmas? While I'm at this. Yeah. Nice. Oh yeah. Back when I was much more of a football fan, I would watch the Rose Parade because that was right before the Rose Bowl. But I don't think that's what they do now. Fair enough. All right, what is going on here? How about that? All right, transition. How about now? Can folks hear me now? Howdy, Judy. So can you all hear Matt? Because he's talking, and I brought him. I've screen shared. I don't know if that's actually going to do anything. Yeah. I could try it without the headphones, but I'm afraid that of echo and all that kind of good stuff. Can only hear you. All right. This is on the fly, so I knew. All right, cancel. So I know I should have. One of the things on my to-do list was to actually, oddly enough, watch a YouTube video on how to actually do this. Let's see, done the screen test video. Screen, no, don't want to do screen. Jack input client. Settings. No properties. Nope, that's not you. Let's add. No. Yes. I know people watching this are going to be so, so enthralled. Yes, I wish to remove that. Let's see, add. Scene? No, I don't want to add scene. And actually, you are breaking up on my end. So what I'm going to do is, what I'm going to do is I am going to take off the headphones and try it through speakers. See what we get that way. Actually, hold on. Sound settings.
Looks front, left.
All right, try it now.
Okay, I am speaking. I am saying words.
Can anyone now hear me?
Oh, I heard myself.
All right, is there any echoing or any of that?
Sounds okay here in Discord.
Okay.
We can hear him now.
All right, well.
Cool.
All right, so yeah, you can hear him now. All right, well, great. I was trying to be fancy. Apparently, that didn't really work very well. So,
It's an ongoing sort of thing.
I noticed that Toon wears headphones when he's dealing with these sorts of things, but so I thought I'd give it a
It's
shot.
the best echo cancellation is isolating with headphones, but you know, electronic echo cancellation is pretty good these days too.
Nice. But yes, eventually I will actually watch a YouTube video on how to actually get this done right. Or anyway, so howdy, folks. As always, I am Professor Parks, PhD, and Matt reached out to me actually this afternoon and was like, "Hey, do you want to go on? Do you want to have a stream where we talk about?" He gave me a list of topics, and we just kind of started having a conversation. And I was persuaded to actually get off the couch and go live, which I am thankful for. And so today's topic is it's really going to be an open conversation as to what is force and what exactly is a force, and would it be better from an educational standpoint to not start with Newton's three laws, which are the traditional way of doing things, or to start with something which we might consider more fundamental, like energy or momentum? Because the notable thing is Newton's second law, if written explicitly, is actually not F equals ma. It's actually the time derivation or time derivative of momentum. So yeah. I will start off by saying, oddly enough, I haven't watched it yet, but I can never pronounce her name correctly. Sabine Hoffeder?
Sabina Hassenfelder, I believe.
Sabina Hassenfelder. A couple of days ago, she put out yet another video that says gravity is not a force. Even physicists get this wrong. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm like, all right, I'll give that a shot. I don't know if you were aware of it.
I'm going to say you would probably agree with what she had to say. I was bothered by it. I did not like that video at all.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I'm honestly, I'm getting quite sick of Sabina at this point.
Really? Okay.
I was a big fan, but there's been a number of times where she just does these videos that I would call hot takes, and this is one of them. It's just like I'm going to have an opinion. I'm not going to give any quarter to any opposing views. I'm just going to say what I feel as if I am the authority and I get to say stuff.
Okay. Did she back up her claims with any kind of? I mean, I'm going to watch it at some point, but I just kind of curious as to.
You got to watch it, but in my opinion, she was just this close to flat Earth logic.
Really? Okay.
With her circular logic, in my opinion, like it was blatantly circular logic, and she had the audacity to say that an accelerometer measures acceleration because that's its name. As if the name of the thing defines what it means.
I think,
like, dude.
I think I have encountered that before with a gentleman by the name of Bev, with the water level. It's level because it's a water level, so obviously.
Yeah, so Rachie says, an accelerometer does measure acceleration. Sure, you can use an accelerometer to measure acceleration, but does that mean, because its name is accelerometer, does that mean that the only thing it can measure, or anything that it measures, is literally then by definition acceleration? Or perhaps could we, apply a little interpretation into what we're measuring and sometimes name our devices a little loosely,
Yeah, I think honestly in this case, and I thought it would be obvious that she's putting the cart in front of the horse. It's not that we call it an accelerometer because obviously it measures acceleration. It measures acceleration, therefore they develop the device and they're like, okay, what am I going to name it? Well, it measures accelerometer, or measures acceleration, so therefore accelerometer.
Right. And don't get me wrong, I mean, there's definitely a point of view where you could describe what it's measuring as literally acceleration. Mm-hmm. Sure. I just, I always try to keep an open mind with other points of view that are just as legitimate.
Got it.
And not try to shut somebody down with these pithy little things like it's called an accelerometer.
Okay. I think I get what you're saying. Is that what it's measuring may not, there could be an argument for whatever it's measuring could not actually be acceleration. It could be, for lack of a better thing, relative density disequilibrium or whatever.
Well, what it's measuring is inertial forces, right?
Yes. Well, and so that gets into the idea of force, and obviously, and I'm kind of a split mind on this, and I think that has, oddly enough, when people, particularly the skeptics, flat earthers, they ask me what I get out of this, and it has, one of the things that I've gotten out of this is that it has truly made me look at sort of the fundamental concepts. And when it comes to gravity, for example, because that's the main one that's in contention, I look at it from a sort of a theorist point of view and from a pragmatic point of view. Pragmatic Rob basically says, sure, gravity is a force because we can use it as such. Most of our everyday experience is not relativistic. At least or more properly, the tools that we have to measure things and the precision that we care about is not relativistic. So, yeah, uses a force. Now, from a theoretical or fundamental hardline support sort of thing, I would say that it's not a force. It's actually a consequence of the bending of space-time. And if I was, put up against the wall at this point, and I am open to other ideas, but at this point, I would say that there are actually only three forces in existence: electrostatic, weak, and strong, and that torsion is not a force, tension is not a force. None of those are forces because they all break down into those three. They are just simply.
Is magnetism a force? Is magnetism a force?
Ooh. That's a good point. Naively, I would say, no, I haven't looked into it, definitely not enough.
I think it's really interesting. I don't know if all the viewers know, but a moving electric charge generates magnetism via special relativity.
Yeah.
So in that case, no, magnetism is not a force by your definition.
Yeah, I would. That would be my answer. Yes.
But an electron has a magnetic moment that cannot be explained that way, and so now magnetism is a force. So which is it?
Why can't the the moment be explained, or why is there no proper explanation for the electric moment?
The magnetic moment, as I understand it, is a fundamental property of particles. It was when it was first discovered that the moving electric field creates magnetism. The very next thing that mathematicians do is they get out the piece of paper and they work out, oh, so an electron must be spinning then. If we take the electric charge of the electron and its measured magnetic moment, we should be able to work out its spin.
Yeah.
And it didn't work. It doesn't match at all.
Okay.
And so they're like, well, we'll still call it spin, but it doesn't literally mean spin. It means something else, and that's where my knowledge ends. My knowledge of it, we'd have to get AB.
Yeah, I was just
this to us.
looking at this, and I was like, I wonder if he's around. Let's see.
Yeah, if anybody can explain magnetic moment, it'd be him.
Yeah, exactly. Magnetic moments. Since he is pretty much an expert at this point on the subject of magnetism, I have to admit that electromagnetism, not my best subject when it comes to physics. So, I mean, obviously I know the fundamentals in order to teach it, but when it comes down to the nitty gritty of it, I haven't really. That's one thing I've looked into classical. Recently I've looked into classical to figure out forces. I've looked more into the standard model, and I've looked into obviously relativity and cosmology, but I haven't looked into E&M, which I want to do because obviously Maxwell's equations were sort of fundamental in prompting Einstein to look into relativity in the first place. So that was primarily my motivation.
Yeah, and for the relativity dissenters out there, that's something else to just throw on the pile of things to discuss is, did you know that magnetism can be derived from special relativity, that we now understand why a moving electric charge creates a magnet? Does that mean anything
Yeah.
to you?
Well, I mean, I don't know, but what I think we can get more traction on is you were talking about the idea of Newton's three laws, and that triggered something in me because I just recently looked into Howdy Blue. Oh, and howdy Julie Rachie, thank you for being here. Electroneutrino. I don't think I've I don't think I've seen you around. Most modern accelerometers measure a displacement of something with a known relationship between distance and force, infers acceleration from there. Howdy, Norm. And so, anyway, so I was looking into relational mechanics for obvious reason. And, well, for those of you who are familiar with the channel for obvious reasons. And I was looking at that book by, I think his name is Assissus? I don't know. Anyway. And he defined basically the three laws of mechanical or of relational mechanics. And he leaves out the second law, actually. The second law is, I believe, no, now I can't remember. Yeah, he leaves out the second law. He basically, he claims that inertia is not a thing. Which I was like, I don't understand this. He also claims that the sum of all forces on an object, including a single force, must be zero. So
Yeah, I was watching you discuss that, I think, with somebody, or maybe you were just reviewing it on your own. I had the impression, I sometimes get this impression, that he's just sort of making a mathematical model, and he isn't trying to say that it's real.
okay,
Because, we could make mathematical definitions of bizarre, reference frames or whatever, and
yeah,
make the math work. And maybe that's what he's doing. I mean, we even have quotes from Einstein himself saying that perhaps general relativity is nothing more than a mathematical representation and has no physical meaning. Or what we're going to talk about here in a minute, I'm sure, virtual particles.
yeah,
Are they literally real, or are they just a mathematical trick? Or, Planck's invention of quantum mechanics was literally just a mathematical trick. He didn't think there was anything real behind it.
hmm
So, does it? Maybe that's what these guys are doing with the relational mechanics. Maybe.
It might be. From what I read of the New World section where he goes into relational mechanics, I didn't get the impression that that was the case. If it is the case, then he's not being honest about it. And what I mean by that is, I would have expected him to explicitly state, this is an exercise to, if we take these base assumptions, then this will follow. From my reading, my impression is that he is putting this forward as the truth, as how physics or classical mechanics works, or should work. Now, granted, I don't know the man. I didn't even know he existed until this paper or this book, and my opinion may be colored because of the folks who have recommended it to me, but yeah.
Well, there's definitely people out there who believe all sorts of things, and we know that we can convince ourselves to believe self-contradictory things.
Yes.
Anyone in the chat now, I think, is very aware of that phenomenon.
Yeah, it's true. It's true, and that is something that we, effectively, that's kind of confirmation bias, is that we have a strong opinion on what should be the case, and we will just ignore any inconsistencies with other viewpoints that we may in fact also hold true. But this kind of goes into the speculative nature of things, and it actually goes back to a Sabina video earlier where she talks about whether or not dark matter, dark energy is in fact too speculative at this point. Is it does the mainstream also sort of follow this behavior of attaching itself to an idea, putting more behind it than is actually warranted, and then just running with it with blinders on? Like you were saying with quantum mechanics, in that, it may be just a mathematical, I don't want to use the word trick, but a mathematical explanation without any real physical underpinnings to it. It's simply a description. So
Yeah, that's something that I like about Sabina. I like that she takes that point of view. I think she pushes it a little bit too far though, into like an angry place
yes,
a little bit.
she is a bit angry. I've noticed.
And again, I'm projecting my own like feelings onto her, but I guess that maybe she makes these videos on purpose, just to sort of stir up the conversation and get the views and whatnot, and that she may not have such an extreme view that she represents sometimes.
That's very possible. I've been accused of doing that when I was younger, of taking a much more hardline stance in an argument simply to, legitimately force the person I'm just talking to prove me wrong. Like I want them to shoot holes in my argument. Now, the problem with that, the problem I found with that approach is you're misrepresenting yourself, and people can take umbrage with it, and I don't think it's a very effective way of doing it. But it probably is a very effective way of getting views. Provocative sells.
Yeah, it does. But with the experience the shared experience that you and I have with this particular community, I have decided, or I have, concluded that I think the extreme anti-science folks may have been motivated by just that sort of thing, that where someone like a science communicator will take a very one-sided, very hardline position, not really explain where it comes from, and just say it. And such as, I might say, gravity is not a force. Now, to somebody who is not currently studying general relativity, right?
Yeah.
Someone who is just like sitting in their chair watching a video, I just said something stupid. That's just dumb, right? Like we all do. You pick up your pen, you drop it on the desk.
Yeah.
There, gravity's a force. You're an idiot, right?
Yeah.
So when a science communicator comes out and says gravity is not a force, they're not teaching. That's not teaching. That's belittling, is what that is doing. It's driving a wedge between the audience who wants to explore the meaning of general relativity and the audience who's not ready for that. You drove a wedge between there, and invited all those who aren't ready to have that discussion to exit the room, please.
So when you say
that's my main problem.
So when you say, obviously I think it's a short that I have where the title of it is "Gravity is Not a Force." So I feel what's the word that I resemble that science communicator, and so when you say it's driving people out of the room, are you talking about skeptics, or are you talking about people who follow mainstream science, or who is it that we're driving out of the room?
Well, I think those, and Rachie has a comment on there. And I'm thinking of Rachie. I'm thinking of you, Rachie, right now. So, if you are a person who's interested in science, you sit up and you say, "What? A science person whom I respect says something I don't understand. I want to know more." Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what the science person is going for.
Yes.
But there's also someone sitting in the room saying, "These science dweebs making up their nonsense. They're all full of crap. Listen to this one telling me gravity's not a force. What an idiot." Right? That person is not brought into the conversation with this. They're very much pushed away from it. And Rachie, you may remember, or I'm remembering the way I remember it, in our discussions, gravity is not a force was almost used like a weapon, like to prove that something
Gravity
was
didn't
wrong
exist.
with science.
Yeah.
that it couldn't be, right? It couldn't be whatever mainstream people were saying because gravity is not a force, so you can't do that. And that's, obviously you've come, I think you've come a long way, and you have, because you always did want to know more, right? So you did dig and find the answers. So you're that exact borderline person, right? Who is right on the cutting line.
Honest,
I wonder,
in my opinion.
I wonder if a lot of people who end up with, their anti-science beliefs weren't sort of driven away from science by statements like that weren't inclusive to them. That, and especially when they're out of context, when they're just like, when someone says, "Oh, I'm gonna go calculate the force of gravity using my kitchen scale," and somebody else pushes their glasses up and says, "Well, gravity's not a force." You're not helping.
Yeah, and I get that, and I think that with, if we look at people like, who's the Brit? Shit, I can't remember. I think he was in a band. I can't remember. Anyway, the NDT of the UK. Anyway, he put out a video. I think Rachel is Brian Cox. Yeah, Brian Cox put out a video, and he talked about the fact of, gravity. He says gravity is not a force. The apple is not accelerating downward. We're accelerating upward. See, my problem with this is the motivation for what Brian Cox is doing is provocative. Yes, while that is true, the average person isn't going to get the full context of that. And I would actually challenge that it's not, well, maybe this is in line with what you're saying, is that those types of videos without the proper context do call things into question, and basically show that there's maybe some kind of rift between, say, him and a textbook, or in this case, a website or a YouTube video that says that gravity is a force, and those people who are more prone to view the world as something deceptive, they're going to see this as, this is an intentional deceptive tactic to do something. But on the other hand, I think that I am becoming more and more of the opinion that these discussions need to be more honest in the way, but those are difficult because, as you say, you do need to add that context to it. And from we get into an argument about it, but from my money, general relativity explicitly states that gravity is not a force. And when I say that, I always try to amend that it can be treated as such classically because of our experience.
Right. So I would first want to back up and say, before you can tell me whether something is or is not a force, you need to provide me a definition of what a force is that I can then use to make a judgment against whether something is or is not qualifying for that.
Yeah.
And so I did start with going to my old physics textbook, and it really just says a push or a pull. It'll say a push or a pull that tends to accelerate something.
Yeah.
It would say, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm paraphrasing. Push or pull that tends to accelerate something or can be used to do work.
Yes.
And if you're telling me that gravity cannot push something, or gravity cannot be used to do work, then there's a very long explanation going to be required there.
No, I agree with that.
I'm sure that the very first problem we did in physics class, involved gravity doing some work.
No, I fully agree with that. I have an old textbook, and someone actually underlined it. Qualitatively speaking, and this is the underlined part, a force is said to act on a body if an agent of some type exerts a push or a pull on it. maybe it's the same book. Typically, a force will cause either a deformation of the body or an alteration in its state of motion, or both.
So does gravity, even under general relativity, does gravity not fit that description?
No, it does. It does.
So, I mean, we can stop the conversation right there. In order to say gravity is not a force, we must first redefine force. And
Yes.
our logic is now circular.
So I was going to say that is that I'm not exactly happy with that definition. I would, but again, and this is very, very vital for science communication. But again, my distinction is the pragmatic side of things and the theoretical side of things. I think that from a theoretical side of things, I would say that that a force needs to have a far more precise definition than that. I mean, even in that author says qualitatively speaking. I mean, this is just a general sort of colloquial way of defining force, and I think that force is taken for granted. I think perhaps that force needs to have a much more explicit definition. Now, again, from a pragmatic side, because I was raised by good German immigrants, is that, yes, tension is a force, gravity is a force, because, that definition is good enough for what we're doing. But one of the things that Rachel was talking about, one of the things that I've noted about Rachel is that, I don't know now, but in the past, she has been looking for the true nature of things. And I don't think that physics can answer those questions. I think that goes into the nature of metaphysics. I think the best that physics can ever do is describe. This is what we think or this is how the behavior of this object is now, and what it was in the past, and what it will be in the future. So I'm starting to hear Tony, PhD Tony's, in my head saying this argument is meaningless because it's nonsensical. But
Well, I will be the first to say the argument is completely semantic. We are arguing over the definition of a word, right? And we're not even really arguing. We're just discussing the definition of a word.
yeah,
Hopefully, AB here. I see him in the chat. So maybe he can enlighten us.
I'm sending him a message on Discord. Oh well, you can see that I'm sending him a message on Discord. Hop in the.
Okay. Yep. And while that's happening, I'll point out that Eric has said force is dp/dt, which I think both you and I, Rob, agreed is an excellent definition. I proposed
Is the
actually,
best
that
definition.
should be the literal definition of force.
Interesting. Okay.
What I propose then is that momentum, something ultimately has to be axiomatic, right? We have to start from an axiom somewhere. And I would propose that momentum be that. Like we have to say, momentum is the thing that ultimately is the arbiter of what is and what is not. And force is the literal rate of change of momentum over time. And that is what a force is. A force is something that changes the momentum of a body.
Yeah.
So that can be qualitative and quantitative now. And then we can look into whether or not gravity qualifies as changing the momentum of a body.
Can we go even further? Because I don't know if momentum is as fundamental, because momentum in some cases is not conserved, but energy is. Could force
In
be?
what case is momentum not conserved?
Never mind. Completely. I'm going to walk off that statement and hope everyone forgets I said it.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think they're both conserved. at least, depends on what you mean by conserved, but
I was thinking of inelastic and elastic collisions, and I got my kinetic energy and momentum flipped.
right, but then even then energy is still conserved. It's
Yes.
just the kinetic is not.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, exactly.
Do we want to have a chat talk with AB about why a magnetic moment cannot be explained through special relativity alone?
Sure. Here, let me do this.
Something about electron spin. I don't know if he's listening. Electron spin can't just be backed out on its own. Maybe it's the.
Let's do this.
And while you're doing that, Rachie says there can be a force without changing the momentum. And I would say to Rachie, only if there's a counterbalancing force. If there can be a force with a matching force to oppose it, such that the net force is zero.
Yeah. So really, if we wanted to be even more specific, it would be the sum of all forces is equal to the sum of all forces on an object is equal to the change of momentum in that object as a function of time. I think that would be more because, as you say, it is. If you have a single force, though, I cannot think of a single time or a single instance where a single force does not change the momentum of an object when applied.
And if you run with it, the PDT definition of force, you sort of can't have a single force. You can only have a force and an opposing force that are equal and opposite. Because the only way to get a force is to change something's momentum, and momentum must be conserved. So there must be something else to absorb that change in momentum.
All right, hold on. So you're saying that a change in momentum causes a force?
Is by definition a force.
Is
I'm proposing, this
all
is
right.
obviously not
Okay.
mainstream science accepted across the world, but I'm
Yeah.
proposing that we define the word force as the change in momentum. So if a particle's momentum changes, it is experiencing a force by definition.
okay.
And if a particle's momentum changes, we know from conservation of momentum, there must be some other body in the universe that has accepted that the negative of that momentum change to balance the momentum change. And this is Newton's third law.
So
Newton's third law
I'm gonna
is conservation of momentum.
I'm gonna put on my Oakley Riley hat. Well, I'm gonna put on my Riley hat and argue cause and effect. Because right now, the way that I understand the way forces work is that the force is the proximate cause and the change of momentum is the effect. What I'm hearing from you, and I could be wrong, what I'm hearing from you is that you have a change in momentum first, and that implies the existence of a force, rather than a force actually causing the change in change in momentum.
Well, I'm maybe I've gone insane at this point. I've had this conversation a few times, and y'all can maybe help me out with this. Maybe I've just lost it.
I feel like that a lot.
I have lost the grasp of cause and effect at this point.
Okay.
Like two billiard balls bump into each other.
Mhm.
There is an exchange of momentum. There is a force. Did the force cause the change in momentum? Or did the change in momentum happen, and from that we deduce that there was a force? I no longer see cause and effect as even meaningful discussion points. I just see that there was a change in momentum, an exchange of momentum, and from that I have defined force to be a change in momentum, so I have a force present here.
It's
Yeah,
certainly
what was the force? In that case, the force was the change in momentum. That's how we think of it, right? We think of balls just bang.
that's almost, to me, it smells something of circular logic. But it's certain. What I will say is that it certainly is an empiricist viewpoint, which definitely has its benefits in that what we are seeing, what we are experiencing, is that the billiard balls are experiencing a change in momentum because their velocities are changing, typically.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but we
and
go
ultimately
into
what caused that was it was a contact force,
yeah,
and we could dig down and we could say that was electromagnetic, and then we could dig down and say that was Pauli exclusion principle. Okay, the Pauli exclusion principle occurred. What
Okay.
was the cause?
what caused the Pauli exclusionary principle to come into effect is what you're asking.
Well, I don't know. You want it to be a cause and effect. What was the cause and what was the effect? And my answer is Pauli exclusion principle. I don't know cause. I don't know effect. I know sequence of events. I can tell you what happens in what order.
Wouldn't that
But-
be a cause and effect?
But when things are literally simultaneous, you can't talk about cause and effect.
Are things simultaneous?
Presumably, a virtual particle is exchanged
Okay.
between two atoms of the billiard ball.
Yeah. And that would travel at the speed of light, which does not imply simultaneity.
Well, it hits both particles simultaneously, right?
Yeah.
So was it the static ball pushed on the moving ball, or was the moving ball pushed on the static ball? Well, that's a silly question. We understand that that's a silly question. They pushed on each other simultaneously.
Yeah.
So what was the cause of the push was that they got in close enough proximity that a virtual particle was exchanged.
Mm-hmm.
And that virtual particle then moved some momentum from one to another.
Yeah.
That's what happened. So then we want to say, where's the force fit into all of this? And I guess I'm saying that exchange of the virtual particle represents a force.
Yes. That is where I'm more leaning towards into the definition of what a force theoretically is the exchange of virtual particles.
Well, I
what causes
agree
that?
that
I
in
don't
that
know.
case, it was definitely a virtual particle. I mean, but is the virtual particle physically real? Or was that a mathematical trick to describe what we observe in reality?
That is an excellent question, and as far as I know, we have not directly observed a virtual particle. It is simply inferred to exist based on current observations. So that kind of gets us back around to just what does physics do? Can physics describe things in reality, or is physics really just simply a mathematical construct that we can use to describe, in some cases, extremely accurately what is happening in certain circumstances? But
Yeah.
to get it, just to kind of revisit your question, I would say that is the cause. The exchange, if the vertical, let's assume for a moment that the virtual particles are real, or are there, or that explanation, mathematical or not, is what is going on. And I would state that is the cause, and then the effect is the carrying of momentum to different particles, the change in momentum to different particles. That would be what I would consider the cause and effect. The cause is the force, the effect is the change in momentum.
Okay, and that's where you're coming from when you say a force is literally the virtual particle.
Yeah. Is the exchange.
You know,
Yeah.
that seems that's a reasonable point of view, right? I don't fundamentally disagree with it. It just seems needlessly limiting. In that, particularly in the case of gravity, where we're not aware of a virtual particle,
Yeah, and that
There could
ties
be one, but
into
it doesn't fit within GR. So
that
right,
yeah, and that ties into why gravity is not a force, which then ties into, I think, what you're trying to say in terms of, gravity can produce a change in momentum, and that's something that I've had a stumbling block on, is that if given the whole classical F equals ma thing, or dp over dt, if gravity is not a force, then what is it that's causing that change in momentum?
well, if we're willing to, once we're talking about GR, right? Now we're talking about four vectors, right?
Yeah.
Forces, I think we can agree, forces are a vector
Yes.
quantity.
Oh yeah.
Now, is that a 3 vector or is it a 4 vector?
Force.
Yes.
Never really thought of it that way. From a practical standpoint,
Exactly.
practical standpoint, I've always used forces as a 3 vector.
And this is one of my gripes with Sabina Hassenfelder and her ilk, who say gravity is not a force. They are specifically saying gravity is not a 4 force,
Okay.
but gravity is a 3 force. And I guess, to be pedantic, gravity is not a force. Gravity is a force field or an acceleration field.
Yeah.
When we multiply it times mass, we get a force, right?
And that's
So
why
I think we all get that, but we get a 3 force. And so if we don't say 3 force, we don't say 4 force, we just say force, they want to suddenly say the word force without a number is a 4 force. But I don't think you can justify that.
you mean a 3 force.
No, when they say gravity is not a force, they are saying gravity is not a 4 force.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, and I think that would thus imply that to those people, or myself possibly included, that a force is defined as a 3 vector. That if time is involved, then it is no longer a force. I think that may break that is the distinction between a force and a not. I don't know if I would not go that route. I don't think it is a matter of dimensionality. I wouldn't define force as a matter of dimensionality.
Well, everything that we've learned, right? F equals ma is where we start, right?
Yeah.
We currently start at F equals ma, and we probably learn it just with scalars at first, and then we learn about vectors. And at that point, we learn about 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time. And we learn that force is a 3-dimensional vector. And then,
Well, and to be specific,
Brian
the way
Cox
that
says
I've
it's not.
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, and then Brian Cox says, no, gravity's not a force. And we go, well, but it is. And then they do this explanation, but it seems deliberate to me that they don't pause to say, force is a 4-dimensional vector now. And when we look at it as a 4-dimensional vector, I can show that its magnitude is 0.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, cool, but force was a 3-dimensional vector up until now. And why are you not saying gravity is not a 4 force, but you're saying specifically gravity is not a force? And I feel like you're quite deliberately redefining what force means at that point. I mean, assuming you had the same education that we all did, where you just read the definition of force, you have to redefine it in order to make it not be a force.
Correct.
But they did not pause to do that.
Well, see, all right. So now I will say that you are going too far into the flat Earth community in the sense that, with your word of deliberate, I don't think it's deliberate in any way. I honestly, I think that with a lot of science communicators, myself included, I have a certain perspective basically, when I state that gravity is not a force, it is due to my understanding of what causes things to move, what causes things to accelerate. And it is not a carrier. There is no carrier particle to it. And that is, as we've discussed, that is basically my strict definition if I were to had a gun to my head. But when I say these things, the idea of vector forces don't come into play, and so the idea that it's a deliberate deception, as it were, I don't know if that's fair.
I don't mean to say the word deception,
Yeah.
but I do think it's a deliberate word choice. I think they're doing it. See, my projection, and I'll admit this is a projection, is that they want to wow the audience.
Oh yeah.
They want to stun people.
Yeah.
And if I were to say to you, well, under general relativity, when we express things as four-dimensional space-time, we can show that gravity is emergent from the concept of objects wanting to stay along a four-dimensional geodesic. We can show that gravity is not a four-force. Everyone's like, oh, that's interesting, but I don't have that same punch to the gut that you get with gravity is not a force.
And yeah,
So
I agree. And also, I don't think that the average person is going to understand nearly what you said. They're not going to be able to wrap your head around, because they've never heard of a four-dimensional force or a four-dimensional vector, or they don't really have a good conception of what space-time actually is. But that being said, I fully agree with you, and I think I even put out a stream that basically said this, is that the main problem that I have with science communication at this point is it's whiz-bang. It is infotainment. You've got to put out statements that are provocative, with very little thought about the implications of what it is you're actually saying, or how that statement is going to be interpreted by the general audience. So I'm fully on board with that.
Yeah, and I think we all kind of do it, even when we're not like performing for the YouTube audience or something.
Yeah.
I think we also sort of do. We see a lot of this just in interpersonal communication. Just when the science nerd says centrifugal force isn't real.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as centrifugal force. We've all heard this in classrooms. We've probably most of us have said it at some point, because we're nerds. But when I think back to my young nerd self saying that, what was my motivation to say that? Was I trying to educate or teach? No, I was showing off. Right, I was trying to show off my superior knowledge.
Yep.
By dunking on somebody.
Yep.
And that's not appropriate for science communicators to be doing.
No, it isn't. And I don't know if that's still the same motivation, because I'm again fully down with you. When I was younger, yes, when I would say pedantic shit like that, it was because I'm trying to dunk on somebody. I'm trying to show them I have the superior intellect. But I think really now the motivation is whiz-bang. I've got to put people, startle people. I've got to break their conceptions and what have you. And I don't think that, I don't know, maybe I'm naive, but I would rather people not do that. I would rather people not actually put out videos that say gravity is not a force, because it comes ultimately down to, for a person in real life, what they're interested in is, can I use it? How can I use it? And so telling them that it is a force or not a force, it's inserting something that it's telling somebody that can lead to a massive misconception that is not useful to their lives in any way. So
and I do think there is an interesting thing there that is trying to be conveyed. It's just being conveyed so clumsily.
Yeah.
And that is that gravity is emergent, right? Which is, I think, kind of what you're getting to with it's not one of the fundamental particles as far as we understand. It emerges as a side effect of something else.
Yeah.
just like centrifugal force. Centrifugal force is not fake. It's real. It happens, right?
Yeah.
You can do work with it.
Yeah.
It does cause a push or a pull. It is a force by that simple definition.
Yeah.
But we can show that it emerges from the quirk of being in a rotating frame of reference, right? And that's what we're that's what we should hope to convey is that thing. That it's not fundamental, it is emergent, and this is what is causing that. And then again, I'm projecting, but I think I get into arguments with physics people all the time about, like centrifugal force is not a force. And I'm like, dude, look at your definition of centrifugal force that you gave me and read that back to me and tell me how that's not centrifugal force. And then they're like, yeah, but it's caused by, and then they go into the whole explanation. I'm like, did you really think that I didn't understand that? That's the thing that I find most troubling about this is I think there are some people that don't understand it.
Yeah.
But I certainly do understand it.
Yeah.
And yet I still wish to call it a force. And then why does me wishing to still call it a force make you think I don't understand the principle? And does that mean maybe you don't really understand the principle all that well? Is it really that difficult? Do you think it's difficult? And this is what's going on in my head. If you think I don't get it, you must think this is a difficult concept. Is it difficult for you to think in terms of a rotating reference frame? Because that doesn't seem hard to me.
I would think that in the cases where, and I hope I've never done this to you, in the case of when someone, for lack of a better term, mansplains to you what centrifugal force is, I think we go back to what is the motivation of that speaker, and I think that the motivation of that speaker is to try to dunk on you, is to show you how intelligent they are, and that's not that is wrong-headed. It is not a good way to have a conversation. I don't think it is. It's not about education. That person, I don't think, is trying to educate you. They're trying to show off what they know. And again, I apologize if I've ever done that to you. But yeah,
I don't think you have. But is there a possibility that they think when I say I don't know what a centrifugal force is, the reaction force of a centripetal force, something like that, and Newton says Newton's third law: every force has an equal and opposite force. If you have a centripetal force acting, then you have a centrifugal force acting in the opposite direction. And that's just, and I just say that, and then they go, "Oh, you don't understand. You're using Newton's law wrong." And I'm like, "Am I though?"
I have thought that, and honestly, whenever I thought of centrifugal force as being the equal and opposite force, I have thought to myself that I'm being wrong-headed, that I'm getting this wrong, that I'm using Newton's third law incorrectly. I don't know if I certainly wouldn't be definitive about that. It's an interesting idea, and I've never heard anyone else explain it that way. And so I would have to sit down and give that a think before I were to make any kind of judgment as to whether or not you understood it or not.
Yeah, I will admit I left out an important statement, which was that I'm talking about the situation where I have a static, like a yo-yo on a static line or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's moving in a perfect circle, something's moving in a circular pattern in its own frame of reference is experiencing the reaction force I just described.
Yeah.
And even in the outside world, it's experiencing that same reaction force. It's the inertial force.
Yeah.
But yes, if you are instead imagining that an object is flying through a rotating reference frame, then calling that a reaction force doesn't make sense. So, yeah.
Yeah. But Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to how best to communicate these ideas, and I mean, I can't speak for the people you've spoken with. I'm curious as to know who they are, but that's beside. Maybe we could do that offline. And I don't know. To me, it all kind of, when we get kind of going back to the force idea of what actually is a force, is you've been talking about momentum. What if it could it be actually energy, a change in energy? I'm thinking of the work energy theorem. Is that
Yeah, you could go that way.
could a force be something that changes the energy of an object rather than just simply its momentum?
I think that would be pretty good. I mean, that's one of the things we learned in like ninth grade physics is the work equation,
Yeah.
force times distance. So, and that's often alluded to in the definitions we find, I think, at that level of what a force is something that could do work.
Yeah.
The problem, though, you get, in my opinion, is it the potential to do work, and that energy has so many forms that your energy may turn into heat pretty easily.
Mm-hmm. So it would be difficult to explain a dissipative force or dissipative energy as a force. I think.
Yeah, I mean, like I swing my hammer, and my hammer hits the nail. The nail moves a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and then the nail gets hot.
Yeah, and the hammer gets hot, not as much.
And the
But
hammer
yeah.
and the hammer gets hot, and it's like, where did the force go? If we're thinking of it in terms of an energy, I guess it went into the heat, ultimately.
Yeah.
And there's also I guess both momentum and energy has the difficulty of explaining to a high school student that the lift force on a wing is not doing any work.
Mm.
An airplane flying straight and level,
Yeah.
holding steady at 10,000 feet, and there's generating all this lift, and it's got this big force on it, but that's not work.
Yeah.
And yeah, also, I guess you could say it's not doing any momentum, but it's unless we somehow have gravity to counterbalance us.
Yeah. So I mean, if we look at with energy, then you are talking about with dissipative forces like with heat or compression, which I guess also then causes heat. You are talking about a change of state of the matter itself, of the electrons within the nail and the hammer. And I think with this, you're just kind of going down the rabbit hole of how precise do we really need to be when it comes to educating? Whenever I talk about gravity, going back to gravity, whenever I talk about gravity in any of my classes, in physics or astronomy classes, I always preface that, gravity, according to general relativity, is not a force, but we will treat it as such classically because it is the easiest thing to do. It gives us an appropriate description given our tolerances, or rather the precision that we need in our everyday life, and it's an easier way of doing it. It's an easier way of describing simple things like hitting a nail or a plane going through the air. So I think it ultimately boils down to how far into the weeds do we want to really get from an introductory level?
Yeah, I think that's ultimately that's what we're talking about. We're talking about science education, because the fact is we don't disagree on what the fundamental properties of the universe are.
Correct. Yeah.
We're just discussing which words to use to describe it.
Yeah.
And to you, a force has come to mean the exchange of a fundamental particle.
Yeah.
And I guess I left off mostly with, well, force as I was taught it in the first place was a three-dimensional vector, as F equals ma. That's what a force is. Force can do work, force can change momentum. That's what a force is. And if you want to say that gravity is not, or that gravity is not a force, now you will have to redefine what a force is to be that fundamental particle. And to me, that just seems unnecessarily complicated. You can say the fundamental particles are fundamental particles. We don't need a separate word for that. Right? And then you have to define something else. We need a new word now for forces that are not forces.
Yes, yeah.
It's F equals ma, yes, but it's not a force. What is it then? I guess now we need a new word.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you on that. And, I think, again, this is something that I think people just kind of take for granted, or physicists take for granted, is that if you really get into the nitty-gritty kind of things, you can see what appear to be inconsistencies with what is and is not a force, as we've been discussing. But from an educational standpoint, what is best to communicate in order to get the students to a certain level of understanding? Because, if you were going to talk about, freshman physics, gravity is a force. I will treat it as a force because trying to describe ballistic motion, or, describe any kind of motion, any kind of dynamics, by continually trying to describe it as, curved space-time, or trying to describe it in a relativistic way is, I think is not only a waste of time, it's actually counterproductive, because they don't have that understanding. High school didn't prepare them for that kind of thinking. So, and then once they graduate, if they move on to be physics majors, then they go on to, advanced study, or, upper division physics, and then possibly even grad school, then you can tack on complications. So,
I'm just advocating. Think about it. Instead of saying, it is not a force, but we can treat it as a force, I prefer the phrase, it's an emergent force. And that's what Prof. Bell here is saying. I like that exact same. That's the phrase I prefer, is either inertial force, or really I love emergent force. Because in a rotating frame of reference, we can do all of our calculations and we can come up with something called the Coriolis force.
Yeah.
And you can stop and tell me that, no, I don't really feel a force, right? Or, the centrifugal force. You can tell me all day long that I don't feel a force, but I know that I do feel a force. Why don't you just tell me I'm feeling an emergent force? This is a force that comes about because we are working in a rotating frame of reference. And if we step outside the rotating frame of reference, that force disappears, right? And I think everybody gets that.
Yeah.
I just think it's a more inclusive way of speaking to say emergent force instead of fictitious force, or even worse, not a force. Like you drop a brick on your foot, you feel a force, right?
Yeah.
And then to say to somebody that was fictitious, or that was not a force, like, it's sort of, that's it. The cutoff of people, right? I think it's off-putting, or potentially off-putting. I think.
So, my question would be, if you wanted to, if we're getting into the bolts of word choice, I understand how Coriolis is an emergent force. I understand how you would describe centrifugal force as an emergent force. I don't understand how you would describe gravity as an emergent force. Emergent from what?
From four-dimensional GR. Yeah.
Would you be able to explain that to a freshman?
It's involved, and usually involves the rubber sheet.
Yes.
I would just say, to a freshman, I would leave it at that. I would say, if we have come to an understanding already of what a centrifugal force is and how it emerges from our choice of reference frame, then it's a pretty small step at that point to just say, Einstein discovered the four-dimensional space-time, and in this four-dimensional coordinate system, we can show that conservation of momentum doesn't make things go in straight lines, but instead makes things fall towards the center of mass. And so gravity actually emerges from our choice of coordinate system, the 3D coordinate system. If we take that 4D equation of Einstein and we turn it into a 3D world that we're familiar with, what we get is this force falls out, we call gravity.
Yeah.
And that's what gravity is, right? It emerges from our choice of coordinate system. We're not choosing to work in this obnoxious four-dimensional coordinate system. We're choosing a three-dimensional one. And in the three-dimensional coordinate system, we've got this extra force. It's really analogous to centrifugal or Coriolis.
I don't know about that. I don't know if it's a simple reference frame, because can you name, what is another 4D force other than gravity?
All forces presumably are 4D forces. Gravity's the only one that act that way. But I mean, any force transforms, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trying to even think. I've never even thought of it. I thought of that question before. What would a three-dimensional force look like in 4D space?
Yeah.
I think they're all just trivial, right? They just have zero in their zero term.
Except in the time dimension, they would basically have zero.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe somebody who knows this better than me could say if that's right or not.
Yeah, and so that I don't know. That's where I would go with saying that it's a little bit more involved than just simply that saying that it's a reference frame translation, or translating it to a different reference frame, or simplifying it down from 4 dimensions to 3 dimensions. Because, and I think that is one of the key fundamental properties of GR is that with gravity, it is the only thing that you actually need to tie time to. That space itself is, that space-time itself is, 3 spatial dimensions and a temporal dimension. So I don't know. I would kind of split the difference in that I don't think I would use an emergent force. I would be emergent for, or not emergent, inertial force seems easy to me, because that from an educational point of view, as an educator, if I say an inertial force and someone asks me what is an inertial force, I think I would have a simpler answer for why gravity, and that would be that gravity changes the inertia of an object. It causes an acceleration on an object.
Yeah. Honestly, that is probably better. Is to just say that Einstein showed us that inertia doesn't mean going in a straight line. It means following this 4-dimensional geodesic, and so it wants to follow the 4-dimensional geodesic. And if you push it out of that, you'll get an inertial force.
Yeah.
And that's what gravity is an object that we consider at rest. Its geodesic just goes straight down through the center of the Earth, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
That's its future straight line. Yeah.
It's the problem when it comes to looking at this, you have the, I use textbooks. I'm slowly moving away from the textbook, where I'm thinking about getting in on OpenStax and trying to edit trying to get into the editorial board of that, what have you, is that, you know, it. If you look at the book, if you look at an introductory astronomy book, particularly, it almost seems like we're talking out of both sides of our mouth. In that, in the beginnings, we talk about gravity as a force. We get to that chapter on GR and basically say, no, gravity isn't a force. And then we get to the talking about the evolution of the universe, and now gravity is a fundamental force. So for me, it's difficult to. It's like, how do I parse this? I mean, the book itself is contradictory. So how do I parse this to get them to understand what's going on? And with when it comes to the evolution of the universe, essentially I punt because you have the very earliest stage is the Planck era, which is theoretically when all four fundamental forces are united. Well, my answer to that is we have no idea really what's going on from a physical standpoint. Our understanding of relativity and quantum mechanics is not reconcilable at that stage in that environment. So, gravity is not in that mix, because once you get out of the Planck era, obviously gravity is its own thing according to the standard model, and then you've got the other three forces acting as one.
Absolutely.
So
hey, let me step away for just a minute. Give me 5 minutes if you can. Entertain the troops or something.
Sure.
Okay, I'll be right back.
No problem. Let's see here. Let me do this. I am being fairly vain in that I want to see myself on the screen. But how are y'all doing? How was your Christmases? Were they all bright and white? Mine was better than most. Oh, Eric. Actually, we talked about that at the very beginning of, not near the very beginning of the stream. Is I told him that I had seen Sabine's Gravity is Not a Force video, that it existed, but I haven't watched it yet. He apparently has and did not like it. He thought that Sabine was being pedantic, my word, not his, with descriptions, and that essentially there's a lot of circular logic. When he comes back on, I'll prompt him to describe it to you. Well, Judy, I would expect so, considering you're in Finland. I would be surprised if you didn't have a white Christmas. I did not have a white Christmas. I had a wet Christmas. Actually, no. Yesterday was actually pretty good. It's wet now. Professor Phil Bell, think about force as the ability to do work on another object. This happens in every context where we describe force. Yeah, Phil, I'm wondering if, from an intellectual curiosity standpoint, I'm wondering if approaching force from a energy standpoint is a better way of going about it. And more specifically, the description of motion, or the description of a change of state. Because you can even apply, I'm thinking about thermodynamics at this point. When you talk about the Saha equation and Planck equation, when you're talking about the change of states in atoms, you're doing work on those objects, or that system. At least I believe so. I could be wrong, but that's the impression I get. But then you have to come back to, and I think this is what Matt and I were really, the kernel of the discussion is not exactly talking about is gravity a force or isn't gravity a force. It's how do we convey that idea? How do we convey the description of things to a student or the general public without confusing them, without misleading them, and really more meaningfully, I guess, or deliberately, is not to put them off, is not to shut down their curiosity or cause them to get angry or cause them to get emotional about it. So, I don't know. I really haven't had the time to sit down and do it as a science communicator. I think Matt's being a little harsh on us who say that who have made the claim that gravity is not a force, but he has provided me with a little bit more insight in that if I am going to make those statements in the future on YouTube, because I do it offline, if I were to approach that subject on YouTube, I would be far more explicit with what I mean. And I am also fully on board with him in that before you can start any kind of discussion in the classroom, out of the classroom, you need to define your terms. That way people understand where you're coming from and you're not like ships passing in the night.
Awesome. Hey, I am back,
Hey,
and I
you're
did
back.
hear that, and I want to acknowledge and agree that, yeah, I am being a little too harsh. I am sort of taking like an argumentative position
Yeah.
that ultimately, and once again, ultimately, we fundamentally agree
Yeah.
on all of the principles. It's just a discussion of how to best approach it.
Yeah. And it's worthwhile. And I think this is a conversation that really needs to be had. And I want to touch on more on this when, I've talked about science speculation or speculative physics from a professional standpoint, not, flat earth or science skepticism, but in the field of cosmology, are we going too far when we start talking about dark energy? Because even I have a problem with dark energy. I don't like the idea that I have no physical understanding of what causes it. Even if relativity is a mathematical framework, and it really is only meant to be a mathematical framework, I can picture space-time. I have an intuitive feel of space-time. With dark energy, I don't. Now, it could be argued that my having an intuitive feel of things should not be relevant. But I just because I don't think it's real doesn't mean it's not right. That sort of thing. But I'm wondering about that. I'm wondering whether or not it gets into science skepticism.
Well, could it be? I mean, first of all, could it be that dark energy is just the cosmological constant, which is consistent with GR? Or have we ruled that out at this point?
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Well, the thing with I don't know. We have not ruled that out at this point. And the issue with the cosmological constant, again, in my case, there are two issues. One, there is no physical energy. It was described as a mathematical, basically fudge factor in order to keep the universe static. And where was I going with that?
Well, let's run
Yeah.
with the fudge factor thing.
Yeah, it's basically.
Is it any more of a fudge factor than the rest of GR?
I don't know, and maybe.
I mean, bending space time, right? Many of the folks in these circles really, 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 really hate the idea of bending space.
Wibbly wobbly,
way.
timey-wimey, yeah.
But you've accepted that, and what made you accept it, I think, was what? I mean, you saw the derivation, and you're like, yeah, but, and then you see the experiments, and you're like, okay, I accept it, right?
Yeah, yeah. And that ultimately is, and I think really with dark energy, if there is, I think the observational evidence just isn't there enough for me. Obviously we have the supernova, the type 1A supernova observations. We also have the CMB observations, and they all point to the idea that the universe is expanding or accelerating. But I don't know whether or not, I don't think there's enough observational evidence there to completely shut the door on dark energy. And I think that is the problem that I have right now, is that the only descriptions that I've seen or talked about is And and I'm not into the research at this point. It's really just peripheral kind of thing. What I've seen is that dark energy is it, and I don't feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's much more your field than mine, that's for sure. But my understanding is that the observational evidence is there and it's fairly strong, but that it's the error margins on that stuff are pretty big,
Yeah.
and the level of speculation that is not even included in the error margins, as I understand it, is even bigger, to the point where it's entirely possible that there's no such thing as dark energy and we're just chasing errors in our observations, I think. That's my understanding, at least at this point. But you don't generally hear that in popular science communication. You just hear 90% of the world is dark energy, whatever percentage is is dark energy. And it's just said is. Like, no qualifiers, no ongoing research statements, just that's it.
And in the last conversation I had with Austin, he kept bringing that up, that the idea that the universe was 98% or whatever,
Right.
something that we don't have a physical understanding of, is problematic, and I agree with him, and I agree with you in that when we discuss dark energy from a popular science point of view, there needs to be a caveat. There always needs to be the statement that this is provisional. The observational evidence is weak, in my opinion, and I also, and you're right, we are chasing. I think there is a possibility that we are chasing errors. Hopefully, Euclid will solve this issue by looking at whether or not the if there is a jerk to the acceleration of, or the expansion of the universe, among other things. Because Euclid at this point is theorized to have the sensitivity in order to nullify dark energy. It can its sensitivity is such that dark energy obviously has certain predictions on whether or not there is a jerk to the expansion, which there isn't according to dark energy, and the what is the term, formation. There's a particular constant that describes how quickly things form in the universe. It's G. I can't remember what it's. Anyway, there's a definitive dark energy says it has to be this or this range, and Euclid has the ability to say definitively whether or not it's in that range or not. So I think hopefully Euclid will be able to answer that question one way or the other if dark energy is not correct or is not the right thing. But and I agree with you in terms of that's the problem I have with the speculative nature of things or with dark energy, is that we do, and really in general, a lot of science that is communicated is communicated as absolute. This is how it is, and it's never really prefaced by saying, this is our best description. This is what we think it is.
Right.
But it can always change, and that's what's exciting about it. I think that is the hook for people.
Yeah, and for any Wits fans out there, that's what science is. Like, science is when you do an observation or you get some data and it doesn't match what you expected, right? And so what do? Do you say, oh, all science is wrong and the earth is flat? No, you say, hey, let's study this some more. Let's come up with some ideas and some theories and some hypotheses and test them and learn more about it. And we're going to follow the evidence wherever it takes us, even if it takes us into something completely unexpected, right? And so that's the truth of dark energy, is that's what's going on, is there's some evidence that did not match expectations.
Yep.
And so we are currently trying to chase down what exactly that is, by getting more evidence, doing some experiments, making tests and theories and hypotheses. And what you're hearing in the mainstream is probably just like the closest thing to consensus that we have, like the most popular or most commonly held ideas of what the evidence is pointing to. Right? It doesn't mean that the science is settled at this point yet. It isn't. We're still chasing that one.
Mm-hmm.
That's what science is for, right?
Yeah.
When you get evidence, you say, "Gosh, this evidence doesn't fit my model. I'm going to need to tweak my model." Right? And when you see the sunrise, you say, "Huh, that doesn't fit my concept of how things should work on a flat Earth. I'm going to need to tweak that model somehow."
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it.
And it drives with, although since I do not listen to Oakley, I do not listen to QE, I've noticed that there isn't a lot of, I don't hear as much that, astronomy is not science, or rather, astronomy is not science because of these reasons. Usually it's just a blanket, astronomy is not science.
Right.
So, but it always gotten to me is like, where did you get this idea of what science is? And to you, what is the purpose of science? Because for me, and I think my colleagues, science is descriptive. It's there to try to have a better understanding of what the universe is doing, and it's provisional. We always follow the evidence. It's really never settled unless it becomes an observational fact, like the shape of the Earth.
Well, there comes a certain point. I guess technically we each have our own point where we say something is settled, and that's maybe part of the problem.
Yeah,
is the idea of true 100% consensus is just never going to happen with humans.
Yeah.
On
Exactly.
anything, even the flat Earth. I mean, dude, we 10 years ago, probably we used to use flat Earth just as the example of the thing that literally everyone has rejected by now. But it's not true.
Not so much. No, not so much. No.
Not so much. So yeah, I mean, there is no such thing as 100% consensus. I guess we each have our individual idea of what is settled.
Yeah, I think that you can. I think as a scientist, you have, as you say, your personal opinion. This is settled for me, unless something comes out that radically nullifies what I think is settled, or really opens up that question, or opens up new questions. For me, this is it. When it comes to the scientific community, that I think becomes a trickier question because, obviously, you're trying to, you basically need consensus. I guess where I'm trying to focus this is, again, from a practical standpoint, because one of the complaints that folks like Whitsitt have had is that the real science is being censored. The real science is being silenced and all that. And there is a certain kernel of truth to that, in the sense that, like it or not, science is supported by money. You cannot, particularly if you're trying to do experimental science, you need funding. Yeah. And then, funding agencies are very rarely, if ever, going to risk money on fringe or untested ideas. And so we tend to fund the things that we already think are more settled than not. And so therefore, Charles Meese or whoever, he's probably not going to get a whole lot of funding to test his ideas, or people who follow his ideas are not going to get funding in order to ideas. So there is a certain practical truth to what they're saying. I don't think it's deliberate, and I don't know if it's right,
Yeah.
but that is the way it is. So
Yeah. I don't claim to have all the answers, but it does seem to me that it would be foolish to fund every crazy idea equally.
yeah,
Right. We're placing our bets. I mean, we're basically like, we're at Vegas here, putting our money on the number that we think is most likely to come up with good results.
yep,
And it's a guess. It's a guess. And history's full of times when the scientific consensus put their money on the wrong spot, and it took years or decades to discover that mistake. That's true. But that doesn't mean I'm suddenly going to start betting the long shots. Right? For every one long shot that wins, there's hundreds that don't.
yeah.
That's why they're called long shots.
I think the point, or with when it comes to long shots, the when they become relevant is when you've placed your bets, and every bet you've placed so far, or a lot of the bets you've placed so far, all lose, and at this point you're desperate to find something, and so that, I think, is where the long shots come in. Is if everything else that you have tried that seems reasonable doesn't work, then you go to the long shots. But I think to incorporate them in sort of the everyday, in when we are placing bets that win, when we are actually getting information that seems to fit within, or that does fit within the context of our modern understanding, then yeah, I wouldn't put money on, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Why look
Right.
into these other ideas if we don't actually have any conflicts, or any real conflicts? So
Yeah, and to go one further onto that, for the benefit of that group, if you want your science to be taken seriously, you must first explain consistently all the observations that we already have. You can't propose something like Einstein can't propose a new theory of gravity that isn't consistent with what we already know about, like, Newtonian gravity. You can't just say, oh, it's not proportional to r squared, it's proportional to r cubed. And we're like, yeah, but we already measured it and it was consistent with r squared, so your theory's instantly wrong. We're not going to fund it.
yeah,
Right? In the limits of what we already know, it has to be consistent. So, I mean, like, recently I was, I was talking about the special relativity stuff, and as I looked into it, I found Fizeau's experiment. I didn't remember, or I didn't even know about Fizeau's experiment, that showed the speed of light moving through a medium does not add like Galilean speed. It's not the speed of the medium plus the speed of light, right?
Yep.
It doesn't work. And he just determined that in 1851. And that's way before Einstein.
yeah,
So anything you put forth now that is like, oh, special relativity is wrong, you have to go all the way back and make sure that your new theory is consistent with that.
mm-hmm.
And those folks that I was talking to about special relativity have not done that. They are still claiming, V plus C, it's V plus C. And I'm like, well, 1851 some dude discovered it wasn't V plus C, and as far as I can tell, no one's ever refuted it.
Mm-hmm.
And even the papers these guys are giving me are using that, using that result as part of the stuff. And it's like, you have to, your new science has to be consistent with what we already know.
Agreed, and I've also said that many times on stream. One of my challenges, I don't have $10,000 in escrow, but if I were to have a flat Earth challenge, it would be describe Galileo's inclined plane experiment with some other force or some other description of gravity than Newtonian For example, I have a video. I probably need to redo it or edit it, but I illustrated that if you do the experiment, you can show that there is a straight downward acceleration of 9.8 meters per second squared. And then if you use Newton's law of gravitation, you also get that there is an acceleration of 9.8 meters per second squared, which, since the two values are the same, or basically the same, with an error, that's how we know, or that is the supporting evidence we have that what is causing that thing to fall is gravity. Now, if they can do that with electrostatics, then I'll pay attention. If they can come up with, if they can use some other understanding and explain very simple experiments.
But you have to also be consistent with everything we know, such as it's trivial to electrostatically charge a balloon by rubbing it on your head.
Mm-hmm.
And neither your head nor the balloon floats afterwards. They both still fall.
Yeah.
So, done, right?
Yeah.
QED, there's no further investigation required.
Yeah. That's the thing that whenever I have a conversation with Whitsitt or folks that agree with him, that's something I'm going to really start driving home more often is, you need to any viable or anything, if you want your theory to be viable, if you want your idea to be viable, then it first needs to explain everything else, the earlier experiments, and kind of going back to that relational mechanics thing is, that was my major gripe is he describes the fundamentals of mechanical or relational mechanics, and he immediately jumps into the rotation of the universe, just explaining how the universe rotation can be explained through relational mechanics. I'm like, dude, you've kind of jumped a few steps. Show me how a ball flies through the air with this, build up to the universe kind of idea. So
yeah, that's actually where that's what got me thinking that maybe it's just a mathematical thing. The relational mechanics. I mean, because Newton's bucket, right?
Yeah.
That's what they were discussing, as I recall. That's like the crux of it is Newton says you spin a bucket, the centrifugal force is evident. We see the rise on the sides, which proves that there is a force caused by the rotation. And the counterpoint is no, the universe is rotating around the bucket, which is causing that force. And like even what was his name? I'm totally blanking on the guy who
Mach?
made this whole argument.
Mach? Ernst Mach?
Mach. Yeah, Mach's principle. Mach's principle would say then that no, that maybe the universe is rotating around the bucket, causing that force.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so in order to accept that, we have to have you hold a bucket, I hold a bucket, we both spin our buckets. Which one of the buckets is the universe spinning around?
Yeah.
We have to accept that the universe is spinning around whatever rotational coordinate system we choose to put our thing on. And that means there is not one answer.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is purely relative, in which case it's not a real thing. It's a perceptual thing.
Yeah.
It's a mathematical trick, not anything real at all.
All right.
Right? Doesn't it just take two buckets to make that, and we're done?
Isn't a
The universe
mathematical?
can't be rotating around both buckets at
Well,
the same time.
Yeah, obviously. I'm just thinking: is it a mathematical trick, or is it pointing to something more, fundamental or physical in the sense that there is no preferred position in space?
Right. That was Mach's point of view, was that there was no preferred thing,
Yeah.
which is sort of the opposite of what Whitsitt wants it to be.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, and that's basically. I would love to talk to Dr. Bennett because I've read. Granted, it's I guess Dr. Sun Genesis, I think it's in his book, but it probably came from Bennett, is that there's a statement where since all viewpoint or all positions in space are relative to each other, there is no point that is more preferential than anything else. That's not their verbiage, but that's their meaning. Then it is necessary to state that the Earth is in fact the center of the universe. And then they just state that as fact. They don't actually describe why. Why is it that the Earth is the center of the universe? They just state that because you can define it anywhere, you have to define it at the Earth. So
That's an interesting read on things.
Yeah.
I'd say you kind of missed the point a little bit.
Yeah, it's well, to me, it's kind of the ultimate cherry pick, or not ultimate cherry pick, but it is cherry picking in that you find that, okay, this is something that mainstream science is saying, that there is no preferential point in the universe. You can define your reference frame anywhere, and it's all equally valid. And they take that and they're like, aha, I can use this by putting in the word must, that the Earth must be the center of the universe. Because of that, or because of that, or what's the word I'm looking for? Because you can do it anywhere, it has to be on the Earth.
But it has to also be on Mars, and right?
Yeah.
It has to also be on Alpha Centauri.
Yeah, I mean that's true, but to them and to the book Galileo is Wrong, their answer is, while it is possible to do that on the other worlds or other points, the actual absolute point is Earth, and that's the part
Is that just because God, or
that's they don't explain it, and that's my main problem, and that's why I would want to talk to Sun Genesis and Bennett is, what is your motivation beyond just because, for why the Earth is the center of the universe? Why is it that point is more valid than any other point? They don't just. I have not seen them give an explanation for that.
yeah, yeah. I mean that's fair. I mean that's also consistent with I think what we see in the kind of air quotes here logic that we see in some of these discussions. Is there'll be just a logical gap somewhere that just cannot be exposed to the light of reality no matter what you do.
Yeah, I mean, it is an assumption. It can be viewed as an assumption, and the cosmological principle is at its core an assumption. We cannot prove that the cosmological principle holds because we have not gone out to Alpha Centauri and actually measured things.
Right.
So it is possible that principle is fraudulent. But again, it comes down to honesty. Is that if pressed, someone should state that the cosmological principle is an assumption that can be false, but they're not willing to do that with stating that the Earth is the center of the universe, because at least with the cosmological principle or other assumptions that we've made, you can't point to immediate questions as to why that would be the case. Because for me, my immediate question in terms of the Earth as the center of the universe is that based on other astronomy we know, the Earth was not there at creation. So what was the center prior to the Earth's formation? So
Was it the place where Earth was going to be?
yeah, and if so, why? What is the physical reason for why that is the case?
Just so I'm on the same page, does this guy say that the universe is 14 billion years old, or is he?
No. Well, Sun Genesis is no. In the book Galileo is Wrong, he refutes that. He basically states that what was he looking at? He was using a very simplistic way of determining the age of the universe using Hubble's law, and he basically was talking about it as a scaling factor. And so he was like, well, they assume that the age of the universe is 13.6 13.8 billion years old, but you can easily state it as 10,000 years old, and then everything else would follow from that. It just scales backwards. So, which, yeah, no, that's not how that works, but, you go right ahead. But yeah, he is, that person is definitely not, I don't know if they're a strict creationist, but as in it's 6,000 years rather than, Lyle, who basically will fudge it and say that it can be a few tens of thousands of years. But he's definitely on the shorter end, tens of thousands of years rather than millions.
Do these guys, have any of these folks ever tried just like last Thursdayism, where we just say, yeah, the universe is only 6,000 years old, and God made it billions of light years across, and on the day of creation, when he created light, he created the light between the stars and us already traveling towards us, so that when we look, we see what it would have looked like billions and billions of years ago. Like, did anyone try that?
Kind of. Lyle's book, which I think I have here, this is Dr. Lyle's creationist book, Taking Back Astronomy. This is meant to be a textbook, by the way. In here, and I can't remember exactly where it is, he talks about the light travel time problem, and he just simply states that is solved because God made it that way. That's it.
Cool.
So yeah, it's basically.
Yeah, I'm gonna say it's last Thursdayism.
Yeah, that's last Thursdayism. Is that the light travel time problem is resolved because God wants it to look as if it's 13.8 billion years old.
Okay, well, and I'm cool with that. But then, if that's your logic, then can't you use it for everything? Can't you just say that the dinosaur bones are, millions of years old, but just because God made them that way?
Yep.
God buried them for us to find. That's what's up, y'all. I mean,
yeah, it's
if
where
that's
does
where
that
you're
end?
going, then you have like a get out of jail free card. Just use it.
Mm-hmm. The next question there is, where does that end? Where is the line between, what science is real and what science is God made it that way? In the sense of what science can we look at that is truly predictive, and what science is just simply God showing us something that we can't actually prove. So, yeah, I don't know.
For me, it brings me to another question though. Like, let's say we accept this. We accept that God created the distant stars a few thousand years ago, and he created the light between the stars and us in such a way that when we look, all evidence is going to suggest to us that star was born billions of years ago. But it wasn't. It was born thousands of years ago. But the evidence that God made makes it look billions of years old. Mm-hmm. So God did this on purpose.
Yep.
To deceive us.
Yep.
So the God you're asking me to believe in is a deceiver.
Yep.
I don't like that.
I don't either.
I have a feeling, I mean, that kind of sounds like the other guy. You know what I'm saying?
Which other guy?
The other fella. There's God and there's the other fella.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
The other fella is the deceiver.
Yep.
And I don't think I'm the Satanist.
Yeah.
I'm not the one who was tricked into doing something. I'm following the evidence, and if God wants me to know something, then, and he created the evidence, that's what he wants me to know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and then the get out of jail free card that they will use, if you press them on that, is we cannot understand the motivations of God, therefore, why even ask? It's not only fruitless to ask, but it's actually inappropriate to ask because we are challenging God's judgment, and I find that to be.
Right.
I'm with you. That's a deception. Any way you want to look at it, that's a deception. God may have a very, very good reason for it, but if that is the case, but it's still a deception. And as you say, the other fella, that's his prerogative. So I really, really have a problem with Dr. Lyle and folks of his ilk. Actually, more so than people like Matt Powell, who will just say, no, what you are seeing is not what you're seeing. It's something else. At least they're honest in their
closed-minded
closed-minded ignorance. Yes. So.
Well, we've been going for a while, but the first topic that I suggested for today, we kind of landed on it, which is many years ago now. I was sitting down at lunch with a friend and coworker, and he's a Catholic, and with a strong Catholic tradition in his family.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking to me about some of the New Testament stories.
Yeah.
And the one I like the best is the wedding where Jesus turns water into wine. You familiar with this one?
Mm-hmm.
I assume.
Yeah. Wedding at Canaan, I think it is, or something like that.
I don't remember the details. It's the water to wine story.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if I can summarize what I do remember, they're at a wedding. They run out of wine. The waiter, I guess, comes to Jesus and says, "Hey, we're out of wine. What do we do? What do we do?" And he's like, "Dude, just serve that right there." And he points at some water. And the guy's like, "But that's water." And he's like, serve it. They serve it, and then the waiter comes back and says, "The crowd was totally happy with your new wine, sir." Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And that's the story, right? And so the usual takeaway from that is that Jesus performed a miracle and he turned water into wine.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to take it literally, that's what it sort of says. It doesn't literally actually say that he turned water into wine. It just says that he told the dude to serve the water, and the dude comes back and says the wine was excellent.
Okay.
And if your takeaway is Jesus performed a miracle because he's the magic man, then I think what you've got is a religion based on the fact that your hero is a party animal. Jesus was a party dude who could make wine. And I'm like, no. If that's your takeaway, you missed the whole point.
Yeah.
The point was you came to your leader with a petty problem that nobody cares about, and he said to you, "Look, the people are not here for wine. They're here for the community and the family and to celebrate what we're doing here, which is a wedding. So they'll be happy with the wine. They'll be happy with the water." That was the miracle, was the realization of what's important and what's not important, and that let's celebrate family and community, and we're not all just here to get drunk.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take that story literally, you actually miss the point of
Yes.
what the story's about. And I think there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that is that way, that if you take it literally, you don't get what's important out of the story.
Yes. And mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking, when you had a talk with like a religious literalist some time ago, and I remember
Jim
thinking,
Waterworld, who I'm actually a little bit concerned about because I haven't seen him around anywhere, and he certainly he used to DM me almost once a day, and now I haven't heard from him in months at this point. But yeah, he was the person I was having that discussion with.
Yeah, so maybe somebody like Jim ought to just take a moment to think about it. Are we saying Jesus was a party guy? Or are we actually saying Jesus was trying to teach us not to be so materialistic and petty, right?
Yeah.
And how much interpretation do we need to apply in order to get the better message out of that story? And I think we'll probably agree pretty quick that no, it's Jesus the party guy. That's silly. It's probably the other thing, or the other one is like the loaves and the fishes.
Mm-hmm.
Is the story that Jesus created a bunch of food out of nothing. He was a magical person.
Mm-hmm.
Or actually is the story Jesus taught us to share? Right? Which of those interpretations is a good foundation for a religion? Maybe Jesus didn't make any magical loaves and fishes. Maybe Jesus just taught everyone to take a little, enough so that everyone could have some. And that could be the foundation of a religion that's worth having, right? So, yeah, somebody like Jim, maybe think about that just for a moment. And realize that there's more to be had here than just the words that are on the page. You got to read into them a little bit.
Oh, I agree. And one of the things that I've said that has gotten criticism from, say, my pagan friends, is I view Christianity and the Bible as a living document, in that it needs to be interpreted. It needs to be constantly interpreted. You cannot take it literally. It is not meant to be taken literally. Jesus never spoke straight in his entire life, as chronicled. So yeah, I do not take the Bible literally at all. The problem that if I were to guess what Jim's response to that would be then how do you know that it's true? How can you take any of it to be true if none of it is literal? Unless it is literal, it cannot be true. It cannot be proven. So
exactly, I would say to him exactly. One of the things I like to say about the Bible is it sounds pretty good. It sounds important. But I want to know which parts God wrote. I want to read the parts that God wrote.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I understand, the only words God ever wrote were smashed onto a mountain. So, where's parts that God wrote?
Well, and really, even that was a transcription. So God really didn't even write those. That is what Moses was told on the mountain and what he came down. The Bible doesn't even describe that moment. The Bible describes Moses coming down and sharing that on those tablets.
Right. So in other words, what you're telling me is that this whole book was written by people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've all agreed at this point that you can't just take the word of people without questioning it, right?
Yeah, and unless even the Protestants that I know from a Catholic point of view, because I used to be Catholic, from a Catholic point of view, this is true, and I'm pretty positive this is also held by all Protestants, is that the Bible is not divinely written. It is divinely inspired.
Well, who gets to decide which stories were divinely inspired versus which were just kooks who had lost their minds?
Well, then you get into, and this is where the believers of Cathol come in, is that you have the Council of Nicaea, and then you have to believe, which I do, that you had the Council of Nicaea, which I think were all cardinals or whatever. They're all Catholic priests, and they basically said, all right, these are all of the books that have been put forward by various people to be biblical. We need to codify this. We need to figure out which ones were actually biblical and which ones were kooky nonsense. And so the idea is that council was divinely inspired in order to choose the right books. And put together the Bible as we see today. You go with it. It's a matter of faith. You either have faith in that or you don't. I know that has been put forth as one of the reasons why the Bible shouldn't be considered relevant at all, is because it basically Catholics put together the Bible, and now and the Protestants threw out a three of the books that the Catholics decided to chuck in. So the question becomes, not only do how reliable is a book that has been translated multiple times or a few times, and how reliable is a book that not even all Christians can agree as to the entire contents of said book.
Yeah.
So, but to me, it is akin to Whitsitt's take, in that, hey, these are the inconsistencies, so therefore all of it is wrong. I don't feel that is appropriate in these cases. So, but that gets into a whole another topic.
At the time, it didn't seem it, but now I realize I was kind of blessed to have really good public education. And probably wasn't until my senior year of high school that I learned that all literature, like good literature, needs to be interpreted to really get the most out of it. And I think that was probably the point when any author wrote a book, including this one, right? And the many authors that wrote the Bible, I'm sure they wanted people to get something more out of it than literally just the words that are there. They wanted, to convey something else.
Maybe. I don't know about the Torah part of it, the early books. I think those were probably meant to be taken literally. But
I don't know.
Who knows?
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's hard to say.
Yeah, I wasn't there, but
personally, I tend to look at all of it in terms of what was this author trying to say here, and if what they were trying to say is they're just keeping down records of literal history, great. But I mean, some of it is obviously not that. I mean, like the Jonah and the fish is clearly not supposed to be a true story. It's got talking animals in it, right? It's obviously a fable.
Is it obviously a fable in the context of the Bible, though? Like within the text?
As I read it, I see clearly a children's story, not intended to be literally true, but it's a fairy tale. It's a fable. It's got a moral lesson, and it's entertaining. That's what this is.
Yeah.
And if you take it literally, you're setting aside all of that, the importance of what the author really wanted you to get out of it. I think that's at least how I look at it. I think you're really doing yourself a disservice if you don't stop to think, what did they want me to think about this? What did they want me to take away from this? Did they want me to take away that once upon a time there was a ginormous fish that ate a dude, and he lived in there for a while, and then he came out, and oh, by the way, there was like a talking donkey or something in that story?
I think
so donkeys used to talk. That's what I'm supposed to take away. No, you're not interpreting.
Well, the thing is, and this is where I guess where I would differ, in that I would agree with that, is if you replace they with God. I think that God would want you to not take that literally. He would want you to interpret the words as it applies to you and to the situation that you're in. The people, though, like, for example, one of the things that I haven't had really the time but had motivation to look into is specifically Leviticus. I think Samuel Eagle mentions Numbers, but there are declarative statements as to how you should behave. I cannot see how those are meant by the author to be interpreted differently. When a woman has when a woman has her period, she needs to get the hell out of town. Like that, I think the author was meant that to be literal. However, I don't think God did. I think there are lessons. There is a lesson there. What that lesson is, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. I haven't really delved into what God may be trying to tell us in Leviticus, in the entire book. So,
Well, my read on those passages would be that they're describing the laws of the time,
yeah.
man's laws, not God's laws.
Hmm.
And perhaps they're invoking the name of God to back up their laws. Uh, but I have trouble reconciling that a truly benevolent God would make any such laws. And if he did, then they would still be enforced today, and they're not. So
Well,
it's a historical record and really nothing more.
my, again, naive at this point interpretation of it is that what those laws at the time were needed, effectively the faith needed to survive. The faith needed to, because man has free will, because God is not a direct interventionalist, generally, in the Old Testament. He's not going to just make all of the problems of the world go away. There has to be a codified system of codified lifestyle such that the Jews could survive as a society and that the faith of God can grow. But I also believe that from an interpretive point of view, is that those laws needed to be in existence in order to in order to fulfill Christ's return, because Christ came back to change. He states, "I am not changing a tittle or whatever of the law." He's not changing the law, but he is basically saying you don't have to follow it anymore. The fulfillment of the prophecy is that Christ basically said that Mosaic law, at least in my interpretation, is no longer necessary. The faith has blossomed. The faith is not going to die. And so therefore holding on to those ideas is archaic, and you're putting those laws ahead of what God really wants you to do, which is to love your brother as your own, as yourself. So that is...
The Jesus stuff, the New Testament stuff, it's got some cool ideas in there. That's got some cool ideas. In the Old Testament, not as much, honestly, as much.
The old, there's a lot to, when it comes to the Old Testament. The only thing that I really reread at this point are Psalms and Proverbs, and I read them in. I don't actually read the Catholic version. I read the King James version because I find the language to be more beautiful and more appealing in the King James version. And I do get, particularly those Proverbs and Psalms that talk about. Serenity, that talk about forgiveness and redemption. Those are the ones that really resonate with me. There are a few of them that are just kind of weird, that really don't seem to apply. I don't know how they would apply to my life, but that's really the only part of the Old Testament that I reread on occasion. Because like I said, I think the Old Testament entirely is just kind of a preamble or setup to what Christ is. Christ is the punchline, ultimately. He is what Christ said is in direct response to everything that has happened in the Old Testament. That is my interpretation of it. Now, another one of my stumbling blocks, because yes, for the audience, I do have stumbling blocks with Christianity, is Paul. There are times, particularly in Romans, where Paul makes some statements about particularly homosexuality that I find to be incongruent, to be incompatible with Christ's words. So I'd like to think that I will not. I have a phrase for it, but I will refrain from saying it. But I think, again, this is an example of divinely inspired rather than divinely written. I think in Paul's missives we see that he still holds on to his Mosaic background, and some of that is still being carried over. Which, if I were to talk to Jim or to Whitsitt or whatever, they would immediately come back to me and say, "Hey, well, then you're basically saying that Paul is wrong, and if Paul is wrong, then how can we take anything in the Bible to be correct? Which I would then follow up with that you should not be taking Paul's missives as literal doctrine. You should be taking them as to be interpreted as behavior, as examples of moral behavior. So.
I would go further and say taking any part of it as literal is probably not a good starting point.
No, it's I think it's actually, from a theological point of view, I think it's a detrimental.
And so is it, quote, true, or is it correct? Some of it applies to our current lives, and some of it really should not. Like the slavery stuff, some people in the chat talking about slavery stuff and the misogyny stuff and the gay stuff. I mean, just all of there's a bunch of stuff that we would say, no.
Did Christ ever condone slavery or condemn slavery? I don't know. I don't know. I'm pretty positive he didn't outright state it, but there is an argument for why he, it's akin to this. It's not slavery, but it's akin to this. The reason why he was so adamant about divorce is because it literally fucked over the wives. Is that men would essentially, that the divorce was one-sided, that only men could initiate a divorce. So if a woman wanted out of the divorce, she couldn't, and the man didn't, not happening. But when it did happen, the wife was, or the ex-wife at this point, was completely destitute. She became entirely impoverished. And so Jesus had a problem with that practice, which is why he was so outspoken with it. In terms of slavery, I don't know. I'm pretty positive he didn't outwardly, stand on the mountain and say slavery is bad. It can be interpreted that he did in other passages, like the Sermon on the Mount. As to why not, I don't know. Honestly, I don't have that answer. So
it does. Yeah. I also, one of my friends likes to point out, like when the discussion of Bible says homosexuality is wrong or whatever, he likes to point out that he say something along the lines of, okay, show me anywhere that Jesus said, whatever Jesus said about homosexuality, I'll follow that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think the implication is it's just never brought up, like, at all. So
yeah. And so that is one. I've heard that argument or that idea in terms of abortion. Is that why doesn't Jesus state anything about abortion? And I think the reason is that was not a topic that was brought up a lot. That was not a topic that was not a topic that Jesus felt was a problem of the faith. Was not a problem of salvation. That's my interpretation. That's my idea. And I know it's not satisfactory to me exactly, but again, I have doubts. I mean, there are things in the why didn't Jesus come out and explicitly state slavery is bad? I don't know. Should it be held against him? Obviously, I don't think so. I think, again, you can infer that slavery is bad from everything else he says, but and in terms of homosexuality, yeah, as far as I know, and I could be very wrong on this, Jesus had nothing to say about homosexuality. Paul is the only one in the New Testament that had a problem with it, and that, like as I've said, that's from Mosaic law, and Paul was a Jew before Jesus touched him. So I wonder if he is simply holding on to Mosaic law when he talks about when he sends out these missives. So, Tony asks, are other people? No. No, I don't believe that they are condemned due to happenstance. I do not believe that, based on the luck of the draw, what is important to me, and I think would be important to God, is whether or not you live a Christ-like life. Now, what that is again, I almost solely go to his teachings as to what a Christ-like life is. And so, and I think that, and I feel as if this statement can come out as condescending, and I hope that is not my intention. But I believe that a Muslim or someone of any faith can live a Christ-like life within the context of their own faith. That is my position on that.
Hey, change the subject a bit. You ever watch what's the TV show called? Oh my gosh, with Ted Danson and
Good Place?
yeah, The Good Place. Did you watch The Good Place?
Fantastic. I love The Good Place.
Great
Love
show,
it.
y'all.
It is a fantastic show.
It was a really good show. It was a good show.
Mm.
I like that a
Chef's
lot,
kiss.
and yeah, that's sort of what I'm hearing, right, from Rob a little bit. Is right, if there's a benevolent creator out there, I don't think their goal would be to punish 2/3 of the planet or whatever, or half the planet, and make them suffer, and because they didn't happen to be exposed to this, or if they were exposed and they didn't give up on their culture in order to switch, that wouldn't be a benevolent thing.
No, I don't. I don't. I certainly don't believe that. I certainly don't believe that God allowed the creation of people for the sole purpose of condemning them. I believe in the argument that I was first asked this, or first came aware of this in high school. I wasn't Christian at the time, but a lot of my friends were. And one of the things that was pointed out to the Christians was, hey, what about those people in deepest, darkest Africa who have lucked out and never met a white person, and they don't know anything about Christianity. Missionaries haven't found them yet, or what have you. They will live their entire lives never knowing about God, never being told that God is a thing. Are they going to go to hell? And if so, how is that fair? And, again, my answer to that is, so long as they live a Christ-like life, then they're going to be saved. But I also don't concern myself with the salvation of other people. That's not my business. That is between them and God. I don't judge what other people do. I judge their actions and how they affect me, but I don't judge other people, or at least I definitely try not to. I am more concerned about bringing the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, onto the earth as best I can. Meaning, I want to bring goodwill and fellowship to everyone around me that I encounter and touch. That is my real only concern. I don't even really give a shit about my salvation. I do not spend a whole lot of time thinking about it. And I don't know, and I really wish others weren't so concerned about it either.
There's wisdom there. Yeah, my take on it is everybody's got the right to their religion, and that's all good, right? It's all good, everybody. I would advise you not to confuse religion and science.
Ooh.
And that starts with taking things literally, like taking written words as literal. is a sketchy place to be at. It puts you in conflict with, if someone wrote a parable and they told a story about a talking donkey or something, and donkeys don't talk, does that put you in conflict now? Are you unable to resolve that? And best to just keep them separate.
The story that always, because it is, I find in a morbid sort of way, if something is just really fantastically horrible, for some reason I find it amusing. I don't know why, but I think it's a defense mechanism. I have to find it amusing. The story that always pops up in this is, I think, the story of Elijah, which is that, he's walking down the path, some kids pop out, heckle him because he's bald, and then 2 she-bears come out and maul them to death because these kids heckled a prophet of God because he was bald. I find that to be interesting. I also find it to be interesting, and this kind of actually pointed me towards, hey, this needs to be interpreted, is that it explicitly states that these are not just bears, they are female bears that are mauling these kids. And I don't know why, I always, when I'm confronted with that particular story, I'm like, that cannot be real. That cannot be literal. And so, because, yeah, that is, to me, horrible, amusingly horrible, if that's the right word.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's Cocaine Bear, right?
yeah, exactly.
It's not supposed to be real.
It's just like, what the, okay, sure, why not? And there was no warning, it just kind of, ha, baldy, roar, ren. It was just kind of, all right, well, why did that happen? So, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, this has been a wonderful talk. It's been great talking to you, Rob.
Mm-hmm. You too. Thank you for prompting me to do this. I really appreciated the kick in the ass.
All right.
The gentle nudge in the ass, I should say.
All right. Cool. And we'll do it again soon.
Yeah. Have a good one. Best to your family.
Okay. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, everybody. Happy Newton's birthday and all that.
Oh, yeah. He was born today, or born on Christmas.
Yesterday.
Yeah. All
All right. Bye,
Cool.
you guys.
Hi. All right. So let's do. Where are we going with that? All right. Yeah, I was gonna hit that. That's what I was gonna do. Yeah, that was awesome. I really appreciate that. I really enjoyed that, and I think we should. I would really like to see. We have Tony in the chat, we have Phil in the chat, and I really would like to see, or have a stream at some point. Maybe I haven't done my 500 sub celebration stream. Maybe that's what I'll do. Is I would love to have just a free for all conversation with Matt, with Tony, with Phil, with Clive, with AB Science. Just having this kind of discussion about science, faith, although I think I'm the only person of faith in that group. I don't know. Science education, science communication, just kind of hashing all this stuff out and having a more nuanced conversation than we can have in chats. So yeah, I would love to have that. Maybe hopefully I will be motivated enough to actually find the energy and start poking people and seeing if they would be willing to do that. I think that Tony has already. I've broached the idea with Tony. I think, and I think he has said that he's amenable to it. But anyway, a couple of things. Yeah, Eric, I realized it was because they were heckling a person of God, and that's almost the literal interpretation for it. I think there has to be more to it than that, but that's it. For me, the central tenet of Christianity seems to be love thy neighbor as thyself. I would say that that is a tenet. I don't know if that is the central tenet. At least it's not the central tenet for me. The central tenet for me is love, but it's that we are capable of redemption. That we are capable of that. Forgiveness is a concept that is real, and that redemption is possible if you want it. That to me is the most, or that is the central, and then of course faith. Having faith is, I think, the most central tenet of Christianity. But let's see, what do we have here? Pronouns are important. Well, why? Yes, they are. I don't know what prompted that idea or what that's saying. I noticed that we had what seemed to be a flat earther, maybe. Oh, Judy. Jim hangs out in MMM. All right. Party Jesus. And I think he actually did turn water into wine, but I'll take his word that he didn't. And yes, the Silmarillion is a really, really boring history book. It's even more boring than The Lord of the Rings. I don't know how that's possible, but the Silmarillion is even more boring than The Lord of the Rings. I think Tony and I are completely simpatico when it comes to our opinions of Tolkien. Is that Tolkien's writing sucks. In my opinion, stories are good. I just really wish they were written by somebody else. Lucky Haskins. I don't know if they're still here, but I was just briefly kind of skimming because I was more wanting to pay attention to what the discussion. But I'm getting that Haskins is a flat earther. Water without containment. He owns several companies. I'm here to point out why you remain deceived. So yeah, okay, here. Let's hear Prof. Analogy. Humanity laughs at you, bud. Nice. All right. Anyway, I don't think he's still here, so I'll get off that. Read Conan the Barbarian stories. I'm not that much into machismo, so I've always kind of I always kind of avoided Burroughs. I think it was Burroughs, right? Edgar Rice Burroughs. Yeah, I've always kind of gotten away from Conan the Barbarian because it just seems to be male macho porn, I guess, or at least that's what it strikes me. Of course, my only experience with it is, of course, the movies, which are awesome, by the way. At least the Barbarian is. The Destroyer, I don't even know if there was a third one. Robert E. Howard wrote Conan. Okay. Burroughs, I know Burroughs definitely wrote The Martian Chronicle, or Martian Princess of Mars, blah, 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 blah. But I thought he also wrote Conan. But anyway. No, I won't quote Conan. I will not quote the three things in life because I don't remember that quote very well. The Martian Chronicles are Bradbury, and those are fantastic. I love the Martian Chronicles. Are one of my easily top 10 favorite books. Fahrenheit 451 was good, but surprisingly, I cannot get into, or did not get into, Something Wicked This Way Comes. For some reason, it just didn't resonate with me. But yeah, the Martian Chronicle, particularly that first story in the Martian Chronicles, was chef's kiss. The one where the Martian was cheating on her husband with, spoiler alert, with an astronaut. And, yeah, perfect. Stream, it was a very good exploration of how basic, the base nature of humans is not just human, that it is of all humanity. So. I don't know why this. I wish I could get rid of this heart thing because it kind of. Hold on, I can. Here we go. Howard's a skilled writer, but every so often there's just there's just breathtaking racism. Yeah. I am thoroughly unsurprised by that. I didn't realize that. I didn't know that was the case, but I am certainly not surprised. I would say that at this point, my attitude is people of that, or the literature of that generation or of that time period is either going to have a lot of racism or a lot of anti-Semitism, or both. Yeah, the Martian books were. I think he had a lot of them. I think the first one obviously, or the first one was Princess of Mars. But again, those are not ones that ones I know. Question: what was the name of Einstein's cat? You got me. I didn't even know the man had a cat. The Conan stories are more than machismo? Okay, all right. Maybe I will give it a shot. Maybe I will give that a shot then. It just struck me, every cover art that I see is just big brawny dude with sword, bikini clad woman, that sort of thing. Howard was a colleague of Lovecraft, less racist than him. From my understanding of Lovecraft is that that's not hard to do. I will say I've only read one thing by Lovecraft and it freaked the hell out of me, which to me, I've read, horror is not really my genre. I watch horror movies, but I certainly have not read a lot of horror books. But Rats in the Walls freaked me out, like to the point that I did not want to read anything else at Lovecraft. It was like he is so good at his craft that I don't want to read it. It is not my thing whatsoever. It's the only time that I have truly been freaked out by something on a written page that isn't Mein Kampf. So I will. Frank Frazetta. Yes, he's a lot of that whole style of art. It is art. That whole style, that cover art business of the whole muscle-bound hero. That's it's awesome, but again, not my thing exactly. Often lived in old houses, share rats, so Rat Story was kind of meh for me. I have not. Thankfully, rats have never been something I have actually ever had to encounter. Roaches, or what we Southerners call roaches, what you Northerners would call palmetto bugs, because the things you call roaches up here are not roaches. Those little bugs that fly up, no, those aren't roaches. Palmetto bugs, those are cockroaches. I've lived in areas where we had cockroaches that you had to deal with, but never rats. I think I could handle rats better than cockroaches. Anyway, hate that damn Hardy thing. Maybe one. I loves me some Poe. So Poe for me is dark, but isn't creepy. Like for me the most creepy, the only time that I really got kind of marginally creeped out by Poe is, what is it? The Telltale Heart, the beating heart under the floorboards. That was kind of freaky to me. But I love that. Poe, for whatever reason, I love. I can't get enough of Poe's work. But really, any other genre that I've tried to read, or any other horror authors I've tried to read, I really haven't gone into it. I would say that, and to me, I don't consider Poe to be strictly horror. I consider him to be gothic. which I guess there is a gothic horror, but I don't know. Again, it comes back to kind of referencing back to Icon Science, that it's the whole definitions thing, and that my definition of horror is probably not the same as everyone else's definition of horror. You know, I look at Poe in the same vein as I look at Jane Eyre, rather. Jane Eyre also has that supernatural, creepy sort of vibe to it, but it isn't exactly horror. You know, Frankenstein, Dracula, Frankenstein. Oh my God, Frankenstein sucks. I fucking hate Frankenstein. I haven't read Dracula. I should, but I'm not really into what is it called? Epistolary literature, where it's not a narrative; it's a collection of letters. I was put off by that, so I haven't read Dracula. But Poe wrote a long poem about cosmology. How the hell did I miss that? I'm going to open up that link. Treatise Eureka. Interesting. I don't think I've ever read it. Well, that'll change. Give that a shot. Treatise Eureka, which he published a year. Yeah. I'll have to find that. I will definitely have to find that. Let's see. I've been at this for close to 3 hours now, so I'm kind of running out of steam, and also kind of getting kind of hungry. So I think I'm about to sign off. Thank you all for being here. For those of you who are not familiar with this channel, again, Professor Parks, PhD. I do content on astronomy, science skepticism, and occasionally mental health. If you like this sort of thing, please like, share, and subscribe. Hit that bell for notifications, and welcome to the channel, and I hope you stick around. If you'd like to support the channel, I do have a Patreon. I believe it is actually in the description. I think I put it in this far. I am going to change up the levels and tweak the rewards. Granted, I've been saying that for months now, but I do plan. It is on my to-do list to do. So if you'd like to help me support the channel financially, Patreon money, for example, has gone to. Most recent thing that I purchased is a ZWO CCD camera that is specifically geared for planetary imaging. I haven't had the time, sadly, to install it yet. I do have it. I'm giving some thought as to whether or not I want to do an unboxing and an installation video. I'm also wondering whether or not I should do that, but only for Patreons, because it was Patreon money that purchased it. Thank you very much to Dora and Judy Bassett, my two Patreons, and so yeah. If you'd like to support me, money goes to that. Anyway, enough for the sales pitch. Matt is always interesting. I hope I was interesting, Cygnus. What am I doing here? So yeah, again, my aim is for Sunday. I will do a live stream where I talk about science speculatism, speculativism or speculative science from a professional standpoint. I know that we have, for those of you in the audience, we have a lot of experience with science skeptics, flat earthers, geocentrism, that sort of thing. But they do bring up, and they like to bring up that, unsettled questions or things that seem to be flights of fancy. And I'd like to talk about the fact that we are getting to a point where maybe they have a point, or at least they are on to something. The idea that modern science, maybe it is getting too speculative. Maybe these ideas of dark energy and dark matter need to be less focused. Maybe we need to be more open to the idea of other interpretations or other explanations for that. And so I will be referencing specifically a video that Sabine did and an article and whose author I have completely forgotten, which are interesting. In both of those cases, the authors are angry. there seems to be a lot of negative emotion when it comes to this. This is does not seem to be an objective subject matter. So, yes, string theory is. I think that was the authors. The paper was mostly pointed towards talking about string theory. But yeah. Happy holidays to everyone. Merry Christmas to all you Christians out there, or those who celebrate secular Christmas. And love you all. And I will see you next time. Till then, peace out and clear skies.